On this episode of Purposely Curious, I sit down with Salvador Bentolila of the Finance Savior. Born in Venezuela, Salvador walks us through how moving to the U.S. and certain life experiences geared him towards the personal finance world. He shares what aspects of personal finance resonate with him and how he wants to help others in this field through the Finance Savior. So, join us and get nice and cozy as this episode starts now. Hello, everyone. On today's episode, I have Salvador Bentolila from the Finance Savior. How are you?
That's correct. Thank you, Marie. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I'm doing great. Hope you're doing very well also.
Yes.
So I'm from the Finance Savior, and it's an Instagram page, also a website. I am it's a side hustle that I started recently, kind of my passion. I've always been super interested in personal finances, and that started about 6 years ago when I moved to the US. I am a civil engineer by profession, and as I started kind of getting into the local culture here, I realized that the system here can get complicated very quickly. And also, this is not personal finances. It's something that's usually not taught in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I started realizing that people around me at work and friends and family are also not too knowledgeable about it. So started getting involved, reading a lot, and then starting helping family, friends, and eventually starting expanding to more people. Now kind of formalize it into a coaching program where I do personalized sessions with people who sign up to get their personal finances in shape. So that's a little bit about me. I'd like to speak about with you some of topics around personal finances, and hopefully it can be a very productive and helpful session for your audience. How does that sound to you?
That sounds good. And then you were telling me you're from Venezuela, right, originally. Was it a culture shock financially when you moved to the United States?
Very much so, yes. When I also left Venezuela when I was at a younger age, still kind of living with my parents and not so independent. So upon arriving to the U.S., I started to have to deal with everything by myself. So that was kind of the first big change for me. Plus the a little bit more cumbersome financial system, I would say here. So yeah, I'm from Venezuela, Latino, and actually for everyone listening, Maria and I connected via Instagram, and I know she also has some Latin background. So always happy to connect with Latin people, especially once you moved out of to the US and you kind of leave that culture behind. It's super great to connect with Latin people also and have that common background.
Yes, it is. Yes. So now that you've moved here, how I know I see the situation in Venezuela. Was it because of what's going on in Venezuela that you moved out here, or was this way before all the changes?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much when the situation in Venezuela started to get a little bit, kind of going downhill, and a bright future was hard to see. And, I kind of wanted to explore different opportunities abroad. And so that's where I started to travel a little bit. I spent 1 year in China where I learned some Mandarin, and then eventually ended up here in the US where I studied, and then I started working, which is I'm still working a full-time job, and I do this after work as a passion that for this topic that I'm really interested in.
So what exactly sparked your interest in personal finance?
So the very first spark is a very bad investment that I made many years ago, even before I moved to the US, and that investment went really bad for me. I lost a considerable amount of money, And so I decided after that that I didn't want that to happen again. And so I started really reading a lot more about what you should know before investing. And then as I moved to the US, I already kind of had that background and built upon that the other areas of personal finances. And then combined with that, I realized how impactful and how significant it can be um, when someone kind of starts understanding their personal finances and taking control of them. It can really be life changing, really. I'm sometimes super surprised and at the same time very happy, and that it's very rewarding to see how people can improve their lives just by by getting this knowledge. So I think
Mm-hmm.
those are the two reasons that combine. Also, the pandemic helped a little bit. I think it gave some people a little bit of extra time if you were working remotely. So that extra time from commuting and being a little bit more time at home also also kind of was another ingredient for it.
Yeah. So now, what would you like if you were to teach you as a kid? Now that you have all this financial savviness, what would you say? Where, if someone out there is listening and they're like, I don't know where to start, where would you tell someone who has very basic knowledge and is trying to change their life? Where should they start to change their financial day to day living as far as saving and so on?
Yeah, so the first well before I start saying that, I just wanna to share with the audience and with you that
Mm-hmm.
please just take the content of here for as a everything for educational purposes, and don't take it as any professional financial or legal advice. Um, in general, for anyone who's starting, there's a concept about personal finances that I think is key, and it's called paying yourself first. And that concept basically tells you to put yourself as a priority above your expenses. Um, Many people, what happens when they get a paycheck is they basically use that paycheck to cover their expenses without leaving any kind of wiggle room to save and start building up, let's say, an emergency funds or a savings account or an investment account. And it's really as simple as reversing the order of first setting the money aside for your savings account or your investments account, and then using what's left over for your expenses. If you do it if you pay first for your expenses and then then whatever's left you use for your investments, you'll find that most of the times there's either not a lot left over, or sometimes you don't even have anything. And this is, well, I don't know, Mary, have you read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad?
No, although I have seen it circulating a lot in the financial world.
Yes, it's actually a very popular book.
Mm-hmm.
One of the very first ones I read about personal finances, and I would like to recommend it to everyone who's listening to this, even to you, Marie. To me, it was super life changing, and it gives you a different perspective on money. One thing that really stuck to me from this book is how there's a section in the book or a chapter where the author talks about three different types of people. Type A is the type of person who gets their paycheck and uses all of that income to pay for their expenses without having any money left at the end of the month. So very hard to make progress. This is kind of what when you hear people living paycheck to paycheck. So more or less, this is that type of person. Then there's type B who are able to save a little bit and start acquiring a little bit of assets, or maybe they're able to get a mortgage, a car, some credit card debt. So they get some liabilities that help them with with their taxes, and then whatever's left they use to pay the expenses. So they prioritize their liabilities and then their expenses. And they this type of person already has a better lifestyle because they have that extra assets that and additional lifestyle compared to the person who's living paycheck to paycheck. Now, the last type of person, and this is the one that really stuck in my head, is the person who throughout their life, working life, saves so much and prioritizes their financial life so much that over time they get enough assets that are cash producing or income producing assets. And those assets, eventually what happens is that they replace the income that everyone typically gets from your day-to-day job, from your employer. And so at that point, you're no longer dependent on an external income source because all of your assets produce that income that you need to get your expenses. And when you reach that point, that's when you become financial independent because you're independent of anyone else. Your assets that you own can sustain you. And yeah, I mean, of course, it's really hard and it takes time to get there. I just think that the concept that was portrayed in that book is super eye-opening and that can be that you can start working on from the very early ages of your life and your career to eventually get there quicker than if you wouldn't have started, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I used to be a type A person in my early 20s. I used to spend all my money. And then I used to say, okay, so now it's time to pay my bills. And then I'd realize, I was living with my parents. So I was like, now I don't have money to pay my bills. I think I was about 25, 26 when I really, really decided I need to get out of debt, kind of. But I hadn't started listening to podcasts yet. But I was just reading kind of like blogs online. So I realized in order to get out of debt, I had to pay more than the minimum for my school loans, which I started doing. And it took me a good 7-8 years, but I was able to pay off all of that by the time I was 30.
That's amazing.
Yes, but it's nobody was there to teach me any of this. I just sort of had a life experience that kind of freaked me out where I was like, oh my God, how am I going to pay for stuff, Luckily, nothing came of it, but it really woke me up into like, I need to pay attention to my finances. And I started to look into, and that's how I had heard about this book as well, is because the blogs I was reading would kind of revert to it or refer to it in one of many books. I just never read it, but it's just one of those pay yourself forward, right? I never had savings. So it's like I started looking at savings as a bill to myself. So every month, yes, exactly. And that's how I thought of it. It's like, okay, well, I need to grow my savings. So how much can I put in? And when I started seeing that my savings started to go up, I started increasing it slowly so that I didn't feel like it hurt me so much to put in my savings. And then, now with podcasts out there, I mean, I'm fully invested in the financial world of podcasts now. So I've leveled up as far as finances, but I completely going through these type A, type B, type C. I at one point was the type A, there was nobody there to walk me and guide me through what I should not be doing, how I should see money. But I mean, and that's what you're trying to do now, right? Is instill that knowledge.
Yes, exactly, and that's the thing. Exactly what you're saying. That it's knowledge that isn't taught, and so unless you have that self-interest from within or something like a life event happens that makes you open your eyes or change a little bit your perspective on money, it's hard to get out of that type A. So I want to congratulations really on making that change, getting out of debt, because that's another thing here, in the U.S., debt it's something unfortunately common. Education expenses sometimes can be terribly high, and people often graduate and start working with a student loan that they have to repay, and it sets you back if you don't pay it as quickly as possible, because that means you can start saving earlier, and that gets me a little bit into the topic of compounding interest, how important it is to start doing it as early as possible. Because when you start talking about compounding interest and its effect, sorry, the power of it really is on the longer term. The more you're able to compound your savings and invest them, the more difference it's gonna make in your life. It's kind of an exponential curve, right? So if you picture that on a whiteboard as in school, it just grows. It becomes steeper and steeper, going upwards as you move across time. So have you heard of? There's also something, another concept popular that I can think of in the personal finance world. It's called the latte factor. Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't. Please explain it.
Yes. So let me ask you: do you drink coffee or?
Oh, the latte factor.
Yes. Sorry, my
Yes.
pronunciation.
No, it's okay. Yes, I've actually also even read the book of the latte factor.
Oh, okay.
But I may not agree with what people say about that, but I
Oh,
would love to hear your take on it.
yes. I know there's some controversy on the latte factor, and I want to explain it and then kind of give both sides. Also, would love to hear your opinion on why you have your disagreements with it. For everyone listening that is not already familiar with the latte factor, it basically starts by saying if you drink coffee and you spend about an average, let's say, of $5 a day for a cup of coffee, and you do this every single day, every day, every year, sorry, you would be spending around $1,700 in coffee. Uh, and that money is not a lot of money. What can be a lot of money is what happens if you take that and invest it into the stock market, for example. Historically, the stock market, specifically the S&P 500, which is one of the major indices in the U.S. economy, has returned about 10% a year of growth. So if you take this money and you're invested, let's say you start from your early 20s when you start working and you do it for a period of 40 years, more or less until retirement, over time, that money is gonna grow to almost $500,000 by the end of your retirement that you could have if you would put this money that goes to coffee instead to the stock market. Your investments over those 40 years would only have been $76,000, but because of the compound interest effect, that grows until almost $500,000. So the the latter factor, it doesn't it I think, in my opinion, it just provides an example. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be with coffee. That's the way I see it. If you tell me I cannot live without coffee. Coffee really gets me through the day, and that's totally fine. And maybe there's another type of expense that you can put instead into investing. Maybe there's a subscription that you paid and you're not using anymore. Maybe you can lower your phone bill. Everything adds up, and I think the point of this example is just to show how powerful the effect of compound interest is.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I understand how some people, can have the opinion of why am I going to, for example, sacrifice my coffee today if I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow? I'd rather just live out my life um, to the full extent today and enjoy it. And frankly, it's a valid opinion also. I don't see anything bad with it. I
Mm-hmm.
think everyone is free to kind of approach their lives on their own way. Financially, of course, that's what a little bit the topic today. Uh, it just shows you how if you make certain decisions early on in your life that do not have a significant impact
Mm-hmm.
on the long run, and in the later stages of your life, it can really have a significant impact. So that's kind of what the latte factor is, and my take on both sides. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem with it. What
Hmm.
I agree with what you were saying as far as, if I used to get coffee from McDonald's every morning because I
Hmm.
drive to people's homes. And it was like, I mean, it was like $1.10. I would get like a small, so I know it adds up. And to me, the latte factor completely makes total sense, right? My issue is with the financial world of, people, finance nerds, that
Hmm.
everyone, we're all into finance, we're all into it, but I don't have a problem with the concept. I have a problem with the people who criticize other people who choose to buy their coffee or choose to buy. So the way I see it is, as long as you budget and all your bills are paid, and you put your money in your savings, and you put in your, you put money in your investments, if that's what you choose to do, right? If you
Hmm.
want to buy that latte, don't let people make you feel bad. If it's that, like you said, if it's that important for you, budget for it so that it's not, you're not going broke over it, right? But it should be after you've paid all your bills and paid yourself first, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So the issue isn't so much with, because I also read the book. It's not about the book per se, but it's more about in the financial world, like the bloggers, and there are people who are very judgmental on people
Yeah.
who choose to buy that. Like I enjoy coffee. I make my coffee at home, but I'm fine. If I want to buy myself like a latte, it's just, there's a lot of criticism out there in the financial world in the bloggers. So that was always
Yeah.
kind of like the issue I had, not with the idea of the latte factor, because I agree with it. Just like you said, it could be like, I buy video games all the time. So maybe instead of buying video games, I should do this, and invest and save. So in that sense, I agree. It's just I have an issue with people who are judgmental for those who actually feel that it's important enough for them that they want to invest in this one luxury or this other luxury, right? So as long
Right.
as people budget for it, I don't think they should be criticized for it or judged. But I don't think that the guy who came up with the latte factor, those were his intentions. I think that people who follow it started to get very judgmental, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
because of the name.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
have an issue with.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, everyone is free to spend their money at their will and how they want. After all, they earned it. And also what you're saying, maybe that person is buying the latter factor, but it's not paying a Netflix subscription.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they're putting that money into savings. So we don't really know the full picture when we see someone buying a latte and making that judgment. Like you're saying, I think the point here is just to show how small actions today can have very large impacts.
Tomorrow.
Well, more than tomorrow, little bit further down the road. But
Yeah.
yes, and I think that's the whole point. I don't know why the name got the latte factor, but yeah, that's I think it's a very powerful. So when I speak to people who sign up for my program, I show this in the latte factor, this latte factor example, but I always make that remark that hey, it doesn't have to be the latte factor. It doesn't have to be a coffee. It can be anything else. If coffee you need it, that's sort of the time. Like you said, just budget for it. My what I focus on is to show them the importance of the compound interest and how significant it can be. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think so. We covered what until now we covered kind of the different types of people, how you can manage kind of your cash flow from this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's very well recommended. We also cover the latte factor, how basically in summary, how small actions today can have very large impacts tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And another concept that I think I'd like to speak about, unless you want to suggest something else, is kind kind of the idea of how to approach uh, your investments. It's something that, people, let's say, you start budgeting and you start putting money aside. Now you have accumulated a decent amount of money, and now you're wondering, okay, what do I do with this money? And of course, everyone situation is different. Everyone life, the, the, the situation changes from person to person. And so it's important to know how to allocate your investments. And one of the first things that comes to mind is your ability to tolerate risk. Investments, I think emotions are a very important factor of investments that is often underestimated. I've been a victim of emotions in my investments. Mary, I don't know about you.
Well, for me, I listen to a lot of. Have you heard of the Motley Fool?
Yes.
Yeah, so I am not subscribed to them, but I follow all of their podcasts,
Okay.
and so I'm more of a buy and hold. So even when things drop, I don't sell. So I don't panic. I
Okay.
just I just buy and hold, buy and hold, buy and hold.
Okay.
So that's the type that I am. No, not very emotionally attached.
Okay, perfect. Yes. That's what I've also, what I learned after my first years of getting into the investment world, where emotions kind of did catch me. So, I completely relate with your approach of buying hold for the long term without really um, giving too much importance of what happens to the market in the shorter period. So, your ability to tolerate risk, I think, is one thing that can determine how you may allocate your investments. There's of course different types of investments. Some of them more risky than others. So you have stocks, you have bonds, you have real estate, you have commodities. There's now the emergence of cryptocurrencies also. And so each of these different asset types and classes have different rewards and risk levels, of course. So depending on how comfortable you feel with where your money is invested, how well you can sleep at night, and how much risk you can tolerate, that's something you can use to kind of gauge how you want to distribute it. Your age is also something important. The general I guess the general idea and concept is that we work for about 40 years during our career. We retire around 60, and the general concept is that as you approach that retirement age of 60 years old, you you have less time to recover your investments from a downturn in the market. So
Mm-hmm.
as you approach your retirement age, you want to kind of be a little bit more careful and with your investments, and maybe allocate your money to something that's less risky. And on the other hand, as you start your career, you're super young, you still have
Mm-hmm.
20, 30, 35 years left until your retirement. That's really what happens today. It's not so relevant anymore because you have enough time ahead, and this is using historical data of market returns. If you're investing in the stock market, you have enough time ahead to potentially recover from that downturn that there was in the market.
Yeah.
And even and then moving further, like even past your retirement age, that's when you really want to be as careful as possible, because at that point you're not generating any other income, right? You worked super hard all of your life for 40 years, accumulated money for your retirement. And I don't know about you, Marie, but once I retire and I stop working, really, I just want to make sure that whatever money I've accumulated and saved and invested will cover the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
that's when you have to start dealing. But on the other hand, you don't want to like pull everything out, and maybe if they're not growing, maybe they won't be enough either. So you want to kind of find that balance between something that will grow, so you will have enough money, and something that's also not too risky in case there's an unfortunate event in the economy and then you're kind of stranded. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that's another really important concept on in terms of the investments for an individual. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on this?
Yeah. So I agree with everything you said. For those of you guys who may not be investing yet, so if you how can we? So you have, let's say you're doing it through Betterment or any of those like Vanguard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, what he's basically saying is the younger we are, the more risky our investments can be because we still have, God willing, decades ahead of us of working. The stock market on average, they say, has a dip every, I think they say like 6 times a year. It just drops but it always comes back up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then of course we have like those recessions that come every 10, 12 years, right?
Right.
So when we're younger, it's almost like we're going to get through those drops and we're going to be fine and we're going to continue to compound and get bigger. But when we get older, you don't want to have these risky portfolios which most of them are stocks. You want to move to more safer kind of investments like bonds, where the number of bonds is higher, just because at that point when you're getting close to retirement, you want to save as much money as you can so that you're able to live comfortably. And that's something that a lot of people learned after the 2008 recession. Their 401ks were like wiped out, because either
Yeah.
they weren't paying attention, and so that's where a lot of people are like, okay, once you start getting closer to retirement, you don't want to have 80% stocks. You want to move to the more safer investments. And so I agree with you 100% there. And I think we should definitely, I don't know that all of our parents know that, or our grandparents, if they're still working, they just kind of leave it to the person handling their accounts. But it's good to at least have that basic knowledge so that you also can tell that, that, okay, I'm getting at that age, I'm getting closer. I should probably rebalance my portfolio so that it's a little bit safer and less riskier versus when
Yeah.
you're younger. Yeah. So I agree with that. I completely agree with that. And I think that's where I think we need to, for the everyday person, right? We need to really start educating ourselves. Obviously, there are certain school systems now that are trying to make personal finance kind of like a class, but it's something that this country doesn't really teach us in schools. So
Yeah.
I feel like like what you're doing with the Finance Savior and putting this information out there, I think this is one of the benefits of social media is that we're able to touch different people, and just like you found your information, I found my information. It was from people I didn't know. It was like, you know what I mean? And then it
Yeah. Yeah.
resonated with you, and then it kind of clicked with us. And so now we're trying to pay it forward into trying to get the word out on why it's so important, even if it's from the basic, pay yourself forward, right? Budgeting to now investments, and so how do we, especially you and me being Latinos, right? How can we
Yes.
get our people up there and educate them? And I think so what you're doing with spreading the word is amazing, and I hope you continue. But yes, I agree with you. We need to change the narrative and get our people out there, right?
Yeah.
So have you thought about writing a book for Latinos
I
on?
haven't. It's an interesting idea that I could consider, but until now, it wasn't part of my project. Now that you bring it up, I think it's something if because I know there's so many books about out there about personal finances, but now that you bring up the Latinos market, I think that if it's specifically targeted for that kind of people, it could be a good resource for
Oh
that group.
yeah, I think you should think about it. I was telling him before we started recording that when I started my personal finance, and it's called personal finance because it's personal, guys. My journey, I was reading about. I started looking into what net worth meant. What does net worth mean? And I looked up my net worth, which is basically how much money you have or don't have, right? At the time, I had negative net worth because my student loans were like more than I had in savings, right?
Okay.
And I was telling him I had looked at the average Latina woman's net worth. It was $100, which is
Wow.
nothing.
Yeah.
That means
Yeah.
most women, Latina women, are in the negative, And I was like, how do we change that? And I was like, and how do I not become that statistic? So that was the light that burned up my bum kind of to get me to really
Mm-hmm.
try to change that for me. And so I definitely feel that you should maybe, or how we talk about asset allocations and stuff like that. So there might be people who have that language barrier who might not understand it. So how can we teach them, right? All this
Right.
information and to make it so that they understand, so that they are able to tap into this financial world. Um, so I don't
Yeah.
know. I say you should think about that and write a book.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'll definitely consider. Thank you so much for bringing up that idea. I think it can have a lot of value. So thank you for that. And I also want to say that nowadays, you mentioned social media, and also on top of that, there's technology that I think it has made it so much easier nowadays to get access to knowledge and also to um, even to, for example, to invest. You spoke about Betterment before, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when we were younger, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, none of these more recent tools and platforms for investing existed. You had to go through a broker, a regular bank, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a more cumbersome process. Today, you can do it from your phone, right? That doesn't mean that um, you you shouldn't pay attention to it. You still need to be careful and know what you're
Yes.
putting your money into it. My
Mm-hmm.
point is that it's become a little bit more available and easier to do that, which is an advantage for everyone.
Yeah.
And for example, with we were talking before about asset allocation, and you mentioned Betterment. So, for example, um, um, one thing that this platform does that is super interesting, I think, is that it automatically it knows your age, it knows what you work on, it knows when you're retiring, and so it automatically adjusts your asset allocation based as time passes. So to adjust your level of risk based on their studies and how much they think you should learn. And you of course you can always change that because back
Mm-hmm.
to a point, everyone is free to decide how to invest and spend their money, but they always provide you with recommendations and guidance of where that asset allocation should be. So I think back to the point of technology, it's something that today is made it a lot easier and provided a lot of help to maybe people that don't have so much knowledge to get access
Yes.
to a type of resources.
Mm-hmm. So the information is there, and you guys have to be very careful because even though it's easy to invest, if you don't know the tax laws or anything like that, it can bite you in the butt after. So
Yeah,
just because it's easy, guys, still do your homework, still educate yourself. And a lot of these websites have that information for you. You can Google, there's podcasts, there's YouTube videos. I mean, you name it, there's so much information out
yeah,
there on how to educate yourself on the basics, because once you're investing, you really have to understand the tax implications and talk to your financial advisors or your tax guys. Just because you don't want to, because it's so easy. My fear is that the young people who don't want to read don't, it can be gambling if you don't know what you're doing. So just
yeah,
always know that, Uncle Sam, our tax collector, is always going to find out. So always, before you make any moves, just always read, always educate yourself, constantly listening to see what the tax implications are. So it's still something, it's very easy to maneuver and deal with, right? Without the middleman now. Just still, because the middleman isn't there, you should still be on top of at least what it means if you sell, what it means if you do this, right? So that you're not shocked when tax time comes around, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. And that's actually one of the um, main ideas, for example, in the Instagram page at the Finance Saver, where I try to educate people with basic concepts, right? I post every day a different concept revolving around personal finance
Mm-hmm.
that hopefully over time it'll build up and help you make these better decisions. And so there's a lot of concepts and a lot of areas there, and hopefully slowly with time it's something that people can start to put it into practice. Because also have in mind, this is not something that it's going to be a change and you'll be able to make in one day. It's also not going to make you rich in one day. It takes time. There's different areas around personal finances, and you're going to have to tackle them, one by one, make sure that everything is in order. Also speak with your financial advisor if you have, or with your accountant if you have one. But at least you already have that advantage of knowing the concepts, the ideas, and how things work, so you can be a part of the conversation with
Mm-hmm.
those advisors that are acting on your interests too.
Yeah. Yeah. So your Instagram page is the Finance Savior. Do you have
Yeah.
any websites or anything else?
Yes, I do have a website also. It's the same, thefinancesaver.com, and I have a link in the bio of my Instagram account. And when you go into the website, you'll be able to read a little bit more about the program and see the different topics that I cover, and more or less how it how it works, what it includes. So I actually we were speaking before about Rich Dad Poor Dad and Mary. So this book, I think it's so important, and it made such an impact on my end, that people who sign up for my program, I sent that book as a welcome package, so they can start reading it as soon as possible. And I
Mm-hmm.
also send one at the end of the program, which is consists of six live one-on-one sessions to kind of it's a book. It's called The Automatic Millionaire, and it kind of encompasses the different concepts, that some of them that we've spoken about today here, and the others that are covering the program. Just so if you ever want to reference back, it's
Yeah.
something that you have handy. And sometimes people have already read those books, so they can be swapped without a problem. But I try to complement the program with some other resources and spreadsheets, of course, to make the most out of the sessions and your new steps towards finances.
Yeah. The Automatic Millionaire is a good book. I read that one.
Oh, you read that one?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. No, those are both of them. Like I said, I've heard of the first book, and so, but I've just never gotten around to read it. But maybe I will add it to my to be read pile, which is pretty long. To finally
It,
get
it
around to it. But yeah, I see the author in interviews, and for some reason I just never got around to it. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
it can be read. Well, at least I remember I read it very quickly, and it was very easy to digest. Maybe that's because it's a topic I'm interested in, and it kind of caught me. But I think for you it will also be an easier and quick book to read. So definitely give it a try when you find some time for yourself.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show today, Salvador.
Of course. Yes, of course. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I think I think no, I'm sure I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that people listening to it also do. Please, I also tell to everyone who follows me on my Instagram page that I'm available for any questions you may have, or if you want to pick my brain or something. You don't necessarily have to sign up for the full program. And another value that I try to convey is that to be kind of there on demand, when when you need it and for what you need it. So feel free, of course, to reach out, and don't hesitate if you'd like to sign up for the program, even better. But there's no need for it to get in touch with me. So you can, of course, send me a message via the Instagram page, and I will get back to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, so check them out at the Finance Savior on Instagram, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
That was episode 60 of the Purposely Curious podcast. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on most podcast platforms, and follow us on social media at Purposely Curious on Instagram and at Purposely C Pod on Twitter. That's Purposely, the letter C, Pod. Until next time, you know what to do.